Good evening, cousins, and welcome to another Shattersong Lark Diaries episode. We are going to hop back into Menhirs Fate before we start looking at some of the other Winds of Fortune coming out for Empire. We will be covering those because I'm keen. 2025, cool year to start. Cool year to start? I don't know what I'm talking about. We're not talking about Empire, we are talking about Menhirs Fate. So, I am unfortunately going on holiday next week, and rather than having no episodes, I'm just going to pre-record some and stagger them out. So if I'm speaking in the present tense of today being Thursday-ish, then it sounds a bit weird next week. Ignore it. Alright then. So we're going to be looking at the baddies today. So these are the four deities, the four gods, the bad guys that Billie Eilish warned us so vehemently against. They're going to be rocking into Menhirs Fate, ruining our time, and I think they're going to fundamentally be the protagonists for the setting. So, this is in a section called History, but it does mainly concern the four gods, as was released on Wednesday. So let's begin. History. The once peaceful world of Alandra has been laid low by strife and warfare, orchestrated by forces now known as the Corruption. This movement worships a tetrarchy of deities that they claim to be the true pantheon of Alandra, and that the remaining free peoples of the world know as the Four. The direct and most powerful mortal servants of the Four, the generals and the high priests of the Corruption, are known as the Crowned. So, I guess this is a little bit like having a tadpole in your brain in Baldur's Gate, if you played that. They are masters of treachery and deception, and have enacted an assault upon the history and cultural memory of Alandra itself, causing the fading of knowledge. Oh, okay. This is new. The beginning of the Corruption was subtle, like a cough that heralds a plague. In the waning days of the Age of Legends, a new religious movement was founded by a disparate group of fringe priests and mages, claiming to have received a divine revelation. Such movements were not uncommon during the Age of Legends, as churches split due to mortal squabbles, or theologians reinterpreted the aspects of the deities. The followers of this new path sought to live in accordance with four precepts. First, I shall seek the plenty that is my due. I shall win it from the undeserving and keep what is mine, and safe from thieves and parasites. I shall reject received wisdom and all those who hide behind comfortable lies. I will not allow my truth to be stifled. I shall rise to my true potential through the power of my will and stand unflinchingly against any who oppose me. I shall cast aside old ways. I shall never let the expectations or achievements of others diminish me. I shall achieve freedom, whatever the cost. This feels like a little bit of a diary for Donald Trump. This is, I shall reject received wisdom and tell my truth. Yeah. Alternative facts, fake news. Alright, we're fighting modern America. Alright then. Through the machinations of the Crowned and the growing influence of the Four in Alandra, the new path offered tangible benefits to its initiates in a way that other movements could not. By that same growing power, there arose a series of natural disasters, and natural with inverted commas, calamities and conflicts that the followers of the Pantheon were hard-pressed to explain or to deal with. The advocates of the new path preached that the Pantheon and their servants were falling short of their duty to protect the realms, and soon the new path had a foothold in every nation, people disillusioned with the Pantheon and looking for answers to those frightening new developments. Thus began the Age of Calamity. Once the Crowned, those lieutenants we talked about, at the heart of the new path had acquired a large enough following to enact their fell schemes, they then performed a series of apocalyptic rituals at key locations of power across the realms. The Four, whatever they truly are, were at least able to take direct action in Alandra, thanks to these rituals. The new path then raised the first of the monoliths, its transition into the Corruption now complete, and the voices of the Pantheon fell silent. So maybe these are just corrupted menhirs, as an example, talking about these monoliths. And if we're going to lean on the 40k side of things, we've opened a warp rift. Nice. With the priests of the pantheon no longer able to communicate with their deities or wield faith in their name, there was chaos amongst the nations. None were spared the effects of droughts, hurricanes, wildfires, and earthquakes, which redoubled in intensity. Those trusted to lead in times of crisis seemed to lose their wits or succumb to despair or paranoia. Monsters ran loose from rifts to the elemental planes, realms threatened to split apart, and the cries of the people went unanswered. In these disasters, only the new path retained its power. They preached that the pantheon had abandoned the world and that all the nations needed to cleanse themselves of the corrupt old ways. Well, all they needed to do was cleanse themselves of the corrupt old ways if there was any hope for a future. People flocked to their temples out of desperation and anger. Leaders pledged their fealty to the new path or were overthrown, and many of those with reservations surrendered to spare their people from warfare. One by one, the new path assumed control of communities, regions, and then whole nations. Some fought against the conquest, either out of loyalty to the now silent pantheon or simply in defense of their own freedom. Those who took up arms were defeated in battle or slain by treachery. The champions of resistance against the new path were forced to either flee or hide. As the new path assumed dominion over the world, they brought the monster attacks and natural disasters somewhat under control. Those calamities that continued to occur were proclaimed to be just punishments for the continued wickedness of the world, or acts of sabotage by followers of false deities. Okay, so they're blaming... it's like Trump blaming climate change on the left. Incredible. Alright then. The new rule of the new path was a crushing weight on the nations. Its sacrifice, hunters, and tribute collectors were intrusive and demanding. Its preachers sowed fear and suspicion from the pulpit. Its informants were ever present. Its enforcers were without mercy, and its iconoclasts set to tearing down anything and anyone that honoured the old pantheon. The new path has raised a network of monoliths across the realms. The pantheon remains silent, and for nearly everyone, this has become the way things are. Ah, okay. So my understanding was just everyone else was underneath the darkness, and they were almost like a different nation, or they'd wiped out the nations we see in play, so like Erdreven and Kairos, for example. But it looks like these nations might have moved to their border territories. I do wonder if we're going to get a map, because I'm trying to imagine the geography of all these nations pushed to the brink of their territory. I imagine it a bit like an arc. So if it's like an oval-shaped world, they're on the western side, and on the other side is the the eastern source of the chaos, well, the darkness in this case, and then maybe oceans surrounding it that stop people going from one side to another. But I think we might have some really cool plot here where we have to go and put down, what are fundamentally our kin, but they're underneath the corruption, and whether we recognise them, whether there's any redemption or not, that's going to be interesting to see. Right. There's a note here around of the tragedy that was the Pact of the Nine, and the great crime that was the fading of knowledge. More shall be written elsewhere. Okay, so that little tidbit at the start around the fading of knowledge, we'll cover that in another episode, I think, when that's released. However, in the bleakness of these reversals remains a glimmer of hope. Through secret ways in the mountain passes, shaded inlets, crystal caves, and living arches in the deep forest, arrives a diaspora of disparate peoples, fleeing the tyranny of the new path. Although the refuges they have sought should be hundreds of miles apart, these folk of sacred and scattered nations find themselves emerging upon the same unspoilt field before a mighty standing stone. As the refugees seek respite in preparation for a last stand, the remaining priests among them discover a revelation. The voices and the power of the pantheon can still be felt at this particular monument to their ancient departure from the world. The message from the pantheon is one of hope. The deities have not abandoned the world, and they are far from powerless to oppose the forces that have wreaked such destruction. This haven, the place we're in Menhirs' fate, and its monuments will be the beginning of reclamation. Oh, okay, well that answers my question about the map. We've all scattered off our own ways, but because magicy-wagicky stuff from the gods, we've all ended up in the same spot, we've united, and now it's time to take the fight back to them. Okay, cool. That answers my question around the geographics, I guess. I wonder if we're in the middle or if we're on the edge still. Be cool to actually see once we start deploying maps and specialist units what the territory is going to be like. I think I remember reading on another episode around the idea that there's no theme of colonization in this, and the only way you're allowed to take another nation's territory is by like fair combat or something like that, or like right of conquest. If they're like if that nation's been wiped out, you can take it because they're not going to use it anymore. But we'll have to see. I'm excited. Right, what is known of the four? So they are called the Fallen, the Terror, the Tyrant, and the Void. So these four gods of darkness. They are the names on the lips of ranting prophets and fanatical converts all over Elandra. It is in the name of the four that the corruption has conquered and subjugated under the leadership of the Crowned. Alright, so we've got four gods. And first off, the Fallen. I shall seek the plenty that is my due. I shall win it from the undeserving, and keep what is mine safe from thieves and parasites, as we saw at the start. So the Crowned of the Fallen are covetous above all else. They have sacrificed their humanity in return for the promise of endless plenty to add to their bursting treasuries. They display their opulence, but their fixation is on keeping hold of their wealth, and it is through gritted teeth that they, or any of them, begrudgingly allow even a single coin or grain of wheat to pass from their control. The lands under their occupation are controlled by want, strict rationing, crippling taxation, imposed debt, and merciless enforcement. The emblem of the Fallen is a silver hand with splayed fingers, symbolizing the grasp for more, warding away the needy and the cold grip of debt upon the soul. Alright, so I don't think I've seen anything like this. I mean, like comparing fantasy gods to fantasy gods, there's always going to be overlaps. So you've got covetous, losing their humanity, that could sit anywhere. Opulence and wealth seems to be, it's like almost like greed, and pushing away the needy as well. It's like a lack of empathy, a lack of humanity. It's interesting. So maybe it's greed. Yeah, greed and uncontrolled wealth seems to be the underlying theme. Alright then, so that's the Fallen. So I guess they've fallen from grace, fallen into greed. If you want to look absolutely minted as a monster, gold chains on top of your costume, sorted. Alright, the Terror. I shall reject received wisdom and all those who hide behind comfortable lies. I will not allow my truth to be stifled. So this is the fake news god, the Terror. The Crowned of the Terror live by manipulation, whether as demagogues wielding xenophobia and paranoia from the pulpit. Yeah, oh my gosh, yeah, it's actually him. Okay, wielding xenophobia and paranoia from the pulpit like a barbed lash, or puppet masters pulling strings from the shadows. They have sacrificed their humanity in return for the rapt attention of the masses. Each sits at the centre of a web of suspicion and fear, manipulating underlings to torment those beneath them in turn. The lands under their occupation are controlled by fear, omnipresent informants, angry mobs, victimized scapegoats, and lies stamping on the truth. The emblem of the Terror is a white eye, symbolizing a constant hostile gaze, the need to watch at all times for threats, and the exhausting state of perpetual alarm. There's also themes of enforced wakefulness and the blindness to unwelcome truths. Interesting. So this is fake news, lies, and deceit as a concept, as a god, and maybe vainglorious pride. Those, almost like influencers. Yeah, there we go. A mixture between Trump and a hardcore TikTok influencer. You want the rapt attention of the masses and you wield xenophobia and paranoia like a lash. I mean, the white eye is a cool symbol. I don't know how you'd rep this on the field other than that iconography. If you've got a monstering group, I think having a priest of the terror, you'd have one person, bedecked in robes or something, and everyone else literally on their knees, like crawling near them and stuff like that, or all just, like a favored prince, you could say. They'll die to protect them, and the prince just stands there, utterly arrogant of the dangers that heroes from Alandra will face. I'm mauling this sentence. I'm imagining some kind of prince with a bodyguard. The bodyguard will die whilst the prince is totally arrogant of the heroes coming to kill him, and genuinely thinks they can't. He's so prideful, so boastful that indeed he does not think anyone can hurt him. And when they do, there's always a scapegoat. So I think the terror is going to have some really interesting infiltration of the Menhir, of Haven. I think is where we're actually camped on the field. That's meant to be Haven. So I think Haven is going to really struggle with terror cultists. Sorry, the terror cultists, because terror cultists sounds a bit different. But suspicion and fear, popular. You could even see popular politicians and leaders. Are they truly popular, or are they following the terror and using that god's powers to aid them? That'll be interesting to see some kind of inquisition form. But then again, if themes are of constant paranoia and fear and suspicion, maybe the Inquisition is exactly what it wants. That's more interesting. I think the Fallen's really cool. I think for some monstering interactions, being absolutely minted and greedy and the like, but that kind of behaviour will probably be easy to find in Haven. But then with the terror, that's going to weave into the politics of it much more subtly. So far, Donald Trump God, interesting. Next up, the Tyrant. I shall rise to my true potential through the power of my will, and stand unflinchingly against any who oppose me. The crowned of the Tyrant delight in violence and subjugation. They have sacrificed their humanity for raw strength and power. In all things they seek dominion and the destruction of individuality, to burn away whatever is not subservient to their will. The lands under their occupation are controlled by force, mass conscription, brutalization, loyalty tests, decimation, and the unfeeling march of war. The emblem of the Tyrant is a red wheel with 6 spokes, symbolizing the literal blood-soaked wheels of war chariots, the tortures inflicted by authority, the grinding, mechanistic and impersonal demand of war, and how all authority flows from the centre. Great, so I think these are going to be fantastic for monstering. Corn berserker styles. I'm thinking like Roman legionaries as well. Decimation in there, and like a strict military will. The organised heavy troopers. Adherents of the Fallen are greedy and trying to steal stuff. They're probably like skirmishers or scavengers on the battlefield, right? Torturers and the like. Maybe not torturers, but stealing from people's stuff, right? They'll loot bodies. The Terror is all about like a personality cult, and following that particular personality onto a battlefield to get more fame. Makes sense. But then when it comes to the Tyrant, that feels like it's going to be the bulk of the enemy infantry and the foes that we face. And especially if that god is all about raw strength and power, I'm hoping we see some really chunky monster suits as well. Actually, oh gosh, I'm thinking about monstering, but monster suits for these? Oh, they'll be good. Right, finally, the Void. I shall cast aside old ways. I shall never let the expectations or achievements of others diminish me. I shall achieve freedom, whatever the cost. The crowns of the Void are consumed by bleakness. They have sacrificed their humanity to be rid of the burden of pity. That which has been built or achieved by others is anathema to them. Any beauty or legacy from which someone could draw strength is to be ruined without hesitation. The lands under their occupation are ruled by alienation, deportation, the destruction of identity, iconoclasm, erasure, and the rewriting of history. The emblem of the Void is a black flame, symbolizing the destructive power of fire to disfigure and pollute, the demand to sacrifice identity and meaning, and the drive to transform and co-opt. On top of that, there's also themes of the urge to erase. So this feels a bit 1984 styled. Big Brother is watching. History's being rewritten. Don't feel pity for other people. You are free. You're absolutely free to behave how you want, as long as I agree. And again, I think this will be really good for monstering soldiers and having bands, disparate bands of troops where there's a strong rivalry between them because they're different. Bleakness and no pity, maybe giving them execution calls and stuff like that for their priests, their crowns. That would be pretty good. And maybe the tyrant troops, they might almost respect someone who's powerful. The fallen might respect the enemy who are wealthy. The terror might respect a famous general on the other side of the field. But then when it comes to the void, they don't care about what's facing them. They're here to spend the lives of their troops as coin in order to buy victory. And if it's expensive, they don't care. Because they shall achieve freedom whatever the cost. So I think these are going to be the most aggressive, maybe the vanguard troops of the darkness. They feel like they're going to be the most active ones trying to achieve their freedom and viewing us as enemies of freedom and trying to purge us. So those are the four gods. The fallen, about wealth. Terror, about manipulation. The tyrant, about force. And the void is loss of pity and ruination, you could say. Almost a bit beastman-like. Whatever's been built or achieved by others must be, is ripped down. Beauty or legacy is to be ruined without hesitation. Inspiration, if you will. So it's like a mono-generation culture. There's no passing on of, titles or maybe structures or cities. It reminds me of a roving band just going around destroying things and doing everything the exact same all the time without caring for people. So I think that's pretty interesting. When I first heard there were four gods, I thought, oh, is it going to be like 40k where you've got almost different emotions as gods? And I thought that was going to be the case with greed here, but actually manipulation and fame, like vainglorious pride, is pretty interesting. The tyrant, god of war, strength, power, a bit generic, but fantastic for a game, right? There's always got to be a baseline enemy, the shock troops, the aggressive, the berserkers, and if they have loads of cool monsters and outfits, everyone's going to love them. I hope they don't turn into the Jotun where it's just line fight, line fight, line fight. I'm hoping that they're more like the monsters are aggressive and they attack and they want to win, as opposed to the others fighting for their lives. The tyrant troops want to beat you down, regardless of whether they get killed or not. And then finally the void, you could almost see a little bit of maybe the Druge in there, lack of pity. Actually, no, I'm going to take that back. I think Druge would be a bit like the Terror. They're controlled by fear, informants, mobs, scapegoating, and telling lies. But with the Void, it really does feel like these are going to be some of the more dangerous monsters, where with the briefing for the others, like being at Empire, right, you're briefed to give the players a good fight. Not deliberately go after killing them, but, give them a good fight, and if they die, they die. Whoops. But it feels like with the Void, the brief here could be, you are actively trying to kill one player across the whole battle. And it might just be given to crew roles, it might be given to specialists like the Crowned. But I think if players start to see the Void as, crikey, they're going to execute some characters like the Shark Heralds at Empire, then that'll be pretty cool. So there you have it, dear cousins, the baddies of Menhirs Fate. Overall, a good batch. There's only a paragraph in each one, so there's no deep lore, but the game is brand new. I'm sure this will expand in play and we'll find out more about it. And overall, this doesn't feel too copy-paste from anything. There's some recognisable elements, but overall, I like it. I think greed and war are nice and recognisable for people. Vainglorious pride and power and fear from the Terror, I think that's going to have lots of in-camp interactions, which I like. And then the Void, I think there's a lot of space there to be very scary. But there we go, the baddies, and I will catch you next time for talking more about the rules and the latest releases. But until then, stay safe, enjoy getting ready for this, and I will catch you in Haven.